My name is Robin Hassler Thompson, and I'm the Executive Director of STAC, the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. We're based here in Tallahassee, Florida. We serve people in this area of the Big Bend of Florida, as well as some adjacent areas. And judging from past webinars, I know we probably have people here from the Big Bend, as well as people all over Florida and the nation. So welcome, everyone. This is one of several monthly trainings that STAC and the Big Bend Coalition Against Human Trafficking provide to our area, and as you see, from a greater area all over. The Big Bend Coalition Against Human Trafficking was established several years ago, and like many parts of the nation, this coalition works together to address human trafficking in our area, with a coalition that includes law enforcement, social services providers, agencies, governmental agencies, community members, faith community, and many others. So we're grateful to have all of us working together on this. It's really the only way we can do this work. Wanted to start today's presentation with you and give you some introduction based on really what's going on in the world around us. First, overall, just to make sure we all keep in mind that human trafficking is something that goes on whether or not there is a COVID or any other kind of emergency. In fact, what we've seen is both sex and labor traffickers are extremely nimble in times of crisis, that they take advantage of crises, and they continue to exploit, if not expand their exploitation of victims. We know that this happens in both sex and labor trafficking. We also know that people who are already disadvantaged and vulnerable in our community are now even more vulnerable thanks to this crisis and to what traffickers will do to take advantage of them. On the slide, you see some observations that really reflect this reality. Every time before we do this presentation, I like to just ground us a little bit in where we are here and now, and to kind of put in context. And I know soon you'll hear from Marina. She'll talk about gangs and trafficking. And knowing now that this is taking place during COVID and what those implications are might be something you want to keep in the back of your mind as we move forward. Here are some observations about what providers and the research has been showing us over the past several months. First, we might see that some of the reports are down for both sex and labor trafficking. We think this is due to the fact that people are isolated, and for children, that mandatory reporters are not as close to them as they used to be. And we are concerned that when COVID maybe starts to go away and we're more in touch with one another, that we will see more people coming forward. There may be quite a crush of cases. I know Marina's going to probably talk about some of the online exploitation that takes place vis-a-vis gangs, but know that that is really happening a lot more, especially as our youth are online because of schooling or because of just being isolated from their friends. We've seen here in Tallahassee that the impact has really affected some of our service provider agency partners, so that availability of housing, shelter, food, other kinds of care that survivors need can be restricted because these nonprofits and other agencies are also suffering during COVID. We're also seeing that the disparities in our systems and in our society are being exploited more. In fact, in preparation for today, I came across an article in the from Polaris that discussed this, and I really wanted to also bring home to you that some of these issues that underlie our society, racism and other systemic inequalities and inequities, are being kind of exacerbated here. For example, some of the research has shown that, for example, in Louisiana, that 84% of child sex trafficking victims were Black, while Black children and adults comprise only 7% of the population. Sorry, that was in Washington State, King County. In Louisiana, the numbers was Black girls accounted for 49% of child sex trafficking cases, although they're only 19% of Louisiana's population. So what we're seeing very clearly here that the existence of racism and other forms of discrimination, particularly economic discrimination and discrimination in, say, access to health care, are intersecting and really providing greater vulnerabilities for those who are already vulnerable in our communities. So please keep that in mind as we move forward and as you work together and support your local anti-trafficking and other efforts in your communities. I'd like now to introduce Marina Anderson. And Marina, so glad you're here with us again today. Marina has been a presenter with us on several of these, and I have to say, you're outdoing yourself in terms of the number of people who are eager to hear from you today. Marina Anderson is the Florida Department of Children and Families Regional Human Trafficking Coordinator for Northeast and Northwest regions of Florida, joining the department in the Department of Children and Families in the Office of Child Welfare in May of 2015, after having started her career with DCF in 2002. For 13 years, she worked as a child protective investigator in Duval County, and in 2014 became a field support consultant for DCF. She's a recognized expert in many arenas, including the safety methodology, training and mentoring, and was personally recognized by the governor of the state of Florida as a star child CPI, child protective investigator. Marina has an extensive bio that's on STAC's website, surviveandthriveadvocacy.org, that you can see, but I just want to highlight a couple more things. She's an approved trainer for the Florida Sheriff's Association. She does great law enforcement training overall, a board member of our local human trafficking task force, as well as many in our region, and is also serving across the board in all of these areas, trying to bring all of us together in this kind of Big Bend region of Florida. I'd like to acknowledge too and thank the International Rescue Committee, our local partner here. STAC partners with them in order to provide our services, and we do direct victim care as well as provide these kinds of education and outreach programs throughout our area and throughout many professions. So with that, Marina, I'd like to stop and turn it over to you, and welcome again, everybody.
Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate that. And I hope you guys learn a lot today on not only gangs, but how it does intersect with human trafficking and how we are seeing more and more cases of gang trafficking, and hearing from law enforcement that they know that this is occurring, and the obstacles that they have to investigate these cases and to identify not only the victims of this crime, but also all the perpetrators that's involved in this gang sex trafficking. We're going to learn a little bit what gangs are and how that comes about. But we know that there is a lot of involvement, a lot of different people that are involved with this. So we want to make sure that we investigate these cases appropriately, and we know what to look for if you're working in a gang unit or work with clients that may be affiliated with gangs, that what to look for and what to do if you do believe someone that you're working with is affiliated or a member of a gang. So first of all, what is a gang? So for our state definition here in Florida, it's 3 or more persons that share collective names, signs, or symbols, including criminal activity equals a criminal street gang. Now, the difference between our state law and the federal definition, the only thing changes is that 3 or more persons changes to 5 or more persons, but everything remains the same. Again, you have to have that criminal activity element, because if you don't, what do you have? You can have Boy Scouts, you can have sporting teams, because they all share the same colors, the same uniforms, collective identity. But when you add that criminal aspect in it, when you add possession of weapons, when you add the gang symbols, when you add the criminal activity piece, whether that be drug sale or other criminal battery, robbery, a lot of things that go along with gangs as well as sex trafficking. So again, for that our code for state of Florida is 875.03. Criminal gang means a formal or informal ongoing organization, association, or group that has one of its primary activities is the commission of a criminal or delinquent act that consists of 3 or more persons who have a common name or common identifying sign, color, or symbols, including but not limited to terrorist organizations and hate groups. So what's the motivation of joining a gang? You have protection, money and drugs, control of the environment, racial and cultural similarities, common enemies, respect, acceptance by peers, loyalty and rewards, recruitment, intimidation, control of turf. But the ultimate is that sense of belonging. And so I want you to really think about that, absorb that meaning, sense of belonging. We all want a sense of belonging, right? We all want a way to fit in. We all want the commonality with our friends and how we associate and what we have in common that we like to do things with. And that's really just a really important part of every human being's life. So a lot of times what happens with kids that are constantly seeking that have that vulnerability, they're seeking that sense of belonging, whether that be for peer groups, maybe that's family. It comes in all different shapes and sizes and variations. But reason why kids that are in care, for instance, in foster care, group care, kids that parents are very, very busy, usually with work. Maybe both parents are working, or maybe it's only a one-parent household and they're working several jobs to be able to maintain that household. And they really are lacking that person in their life, that person that brings that sense of family, that sense of belonging. And that's a big factor that we see with kids joining these gangs. Also, a lot of it is protection, because if they live in a community in which gang affiliation is all around them, they may be scared to go to the local park or even just walk into the bus stop. Sometimes they have to go through different turfs or territories. So sometimes they join just for that added barrier of protection. So I want you to kind of keep that in mind throughout this presentation. So where's the recruiting for gangs? It's happening wherever kids are, which is the same that we see also with human trafficking, right? They're going to be where the kids are. They're going to hang out at the bus stops. They're going to be recruiting right out of your middle and high schools. They're going to be on social media, which we are seeing a tenfold of this. We've been seeing an escalation of social media recruitment over the last few years. But since COVID, this has become even a bigger issue because of the amount of time kids have on social media, on apps, on websites, schooling, gaming systems, and perpetrators and traffickers know this is occurring. They know this is where kids are. So they're actively reaching out and communicating with kids to recruit them, not just for gangs, but also into human trafficking altogether. So you really need to monitor your kids' social media accounts. You need to be paying attention to the apps that they're downloading, the games that they're playing. Who are they playing with on these games? Who are their friends? And are they truly their friends, or are they online friends? And the dangers. And we have a whole separate presentation on social media safety that's actually on the STAC website as well as the Department of Children and Families and OCW and University of South Florida. So please feel free, if you haven't seen that presentation, to pull that up. Bus stations, shopping malls, sports venues, skate parks, city libraries, basically anywhere kids congregate or young folks congregate is where you're going to see trafficking and recruitment happening, and gang recruitment also happening. So what is the process? A lot of people tell me, oh, well, you know what? They're not a gang member. They're a wannabe. Well, I can tell you from experience that this category can be even more dangerous than a full-fledged affiliated gang member. And the reason for that is they have something to prove, right? They're out there. They're trying to get notice to the gangs to show that they're hard enough to be in the gang. So they're constantly trying to prove themselves. And there's a lot of instability with that. And then you have, of course, the OGs, the original gangsters. And honestly, we're seeing that generational. So we're seeing, grandparents that were gang members or currently gang members, aunts, uncles, parents, siblings, and it almost becomes a rite of passage for these kids once they reach a certain age that they're going to be initiated in. Jumped in is a violent beating process, and that is basically for females and males. Sexed in is primarily female. And we do see this quite often. This is a popular way to initiate a female into the gang. And that's why it's so important, if you're working with a possible female that's affiliated with the gang, you need to really be paying attention and dig, because most likely she is being used in a sexual way for that gang. So sexed in, they have to roll a die or a dice, and whatever they roll is how many gang members have to have sex with them in front of the gang. Most gangs, other than just a small percentage, the females have no voting right. They have no voice in the gang. So if a male gang member at any point wants to have sex with that female, she has to submit. She can't say no. And whether that's one gang member or 5 gang members, all at the same time. So if that's the case, then that's what has to happen. They also will outsource them. So they supplement their income by selling the females within the gang for sex trafficking. And that's what we're seeing. And if you're working in gang units, whether you're law enforcement or on social services side, you need to be paying attention to that, because I work with a lot of different gang units throughout Florida, and they may tell me, hey, we know they're running girls. We know they've been doing it for a long time, but we just can't get them to talk. Well, we're going to go over why that is, why it's so difficult for that to happen. And then also that wannabe category, they commit a criminal act to prove themselves tough enough to be a gang member. So they're blessed in. And that could be a drive-by shooting. It could be a big drug sale. It could be multiple things that could happen to have them be able to be blessed in the gang without having to be jumped in. So some of the street gangs we see in Florida, and of course this is on the more national level gangs, for us to really dig deep in your local areas, and of course you guys are from all over the country, I really encourage you to seek out your local gang units and talk about your local street gangs that you're seeing and what's happening in your own community, because it will vary. And we're going to talk about hybrid street gangs for a few minutes, but I can't focus on it too much because we are in such a widespread area. What is happening in one area, for instance, Jacksonville or Tallahassee or Miami, is going to be very different than what might be happening in your county. So what are the national level gangs that we know are here locally? We know Folk Nation, Crips, Bloods, Hispanic gangs such as Hispanos, Latinos, MS, 13, hybrid street gangs as well. So what to look for, Folk Nation? We're going to go over this very briefly because I really want you guys to get into knowing what to do once you identify a gang member that you might be working with. But one of the most popular ones that we have here is Folk Nation. And we know Folk Nation is very heavily involved in sex trafficking. We've had multiple cases that has been prosecuted throughout Florida, as well as the United States with the Gangster disciples. There's pockets of our state that is pretty much 90% of all trafficking that we are identifying has an affiliation with Gangster disciples. So we know they are heavily involved in recruitment of minors and young adults. We know that their colors are blue, black, gray, and white. We know that they're with all gangs. It's not just Folk Nation, but all gangs are alphabetically and numerical associated. So for instance, 274 is Black Gangster Disciple, 74 Gangster Disciple. So you really need to pay attention to the lettering, the abbreviation compared to the numbers of the alphabet, because there's a correlation. They're right side oriented, and their rivals are People Nation. So you can see the Gangster Disciples is that deep royal blue or that Duke blue. So you might see some of your clients, if they're wearing these colors, maybe you go and do a home visit and the entire closet is full of this royal blue, a lot of Duke, a lot of Georgetown is another popular color that they use, or affiliation that they use. Stars of David, also very common. With that, a lot of 74s, 274s, you would see that in whether it's clothing, artwork, or different things of that nature. So really be paying attention to that. So again, going back, if you're doing a home visit and you see that, they have all this one color and none of any other colors, what's the reasoning? Now, it could be they're just a huge Duke fan or a huge Georgetown fan, and maybe they have a sibling that goes there, or maybe they aspire to go there one day. There's obviously an explanation. But if there's no explanation and you're talking to that parent, the parent says, we don't know. All of a sudden they just decided that they are absolutely against the color red and they want everything that we purchased to be this royal blue, then obviously you need to be paying attention to that and see exactly what's going on. Moving on to People Nation, Black Peacestone Nation, Vice Lords, Latin Kings. There's a lot of artwork that comes in there, a lot of graffiti. that you may see. Their artwork is pretty extravagant. You'll see it on fences, roadways, underpasses. The colors are black, red, or yellow, and their rivals are Folk Nation and their left side oriented. So the Latin Kings are yellow and black. You're going to see again that artwork. I want you to pay attention to the points on the crowns and the tiaras and tattoos and artwork, because that's going to lead you to the possibility of knowing which gang they might possibly be affiliated with. Latinos is this red color. We're going to go to that in a second. Crips. So with Crips, it's blue, light blue, or orange, and it depends on the subset. They rival Bloods or the Black Gangster Disciples and the Serenos. They're this baby blue color, so more of like the UNC colors. And that's what differs between the Gangster Disciples, again, is that royal blue. Crips is more of a lighter blue color. You may see this again on clothing. You may see it on belt buckles, shoelaces, hair bows or hair beading, bandanas. Moving on to the Bloods, red or green, depending on the subset. Primarily it is red. They rival the Crips. You're going to see a lot of the 52. You're going to see a lot of the Chicago Bulls. The coloring, a lot of that red coloring and with clothing, and they're going to be absolutely against any other color, especially blue. Moving on to Serenos, Southerner and Spanish. The colors are blue, black, and brown. And again, depending on that subset, 13 or 18 is usually the numbers you're going to see affiliated, and they rival the Nortinos. Nortinos, again, is going to be red. Their number is 14, and they rival the Serenos. Moving on to MS-13. So this is based out of a El Salvadorian gang. Again, that white, blue, and white, so it can be a little bit confusing sometimes because of the Crips colors as well. They may also use blue and gray. They number 13, and they rival everyone.
I was going to ask you somebody's asking if the Serenos and the MS-13 are the same gang or if they're a rival gang.
They're not part of the same gang. They do rival because MS-13 is going to rival anyone. MS-13 is very, very heavily involved in trafficking. Again, many prosecutions throughout our nation with this particular gang. They're heavily tattooed, not just the males, but the females as well. Very little voice or voting right at all with the females. This also is a lot of labor trafficking as well as sex trafficking that occurs within this gang. It's a lot of traveling, a lot of movement, depending on what's going on. And a lot of times you can see that also with the labor trafficking piece when they're moving from different agricultural fields, depending on the season, on what's coming in, such as crops, citrus, or blueberries, and those type of things. So we do see that. They're a very violent gang. Definitely do not approach unless you're obviously working in the gang unit and that's part of your job. But as far as a community member, you need to be very careful. If you are working with a client that you feel is affiliated, please, use caution with what you do, with any gang for that matter, but this particular gang is known for very violent activity. Definitely notify your supervisors if you feel like anyone that you're working with has any affiliation with gangs. Yes, I think someone just said about the face tattooing. That's very heavily, and that's, again, males and females. It's very common. So we're moving on. Insane Clown Posse. A lot of people, when I do this presentation, kind of chuckle or like, what in the world is this? But it meets the classification. Remember, I said state definition 3 or more. Federal definition is 5 or more. And this is usually a traveling group. They're entertainers, they're jugglers, fire breathers. We see a lot of this with our runaway youth that get involved with this particular group, and they travel from city to city depending on what's going on. Sometimes you can see them, on the street panhandling for money and things of that nature. But there is, the rivals really depend on the location and what's going on. And more of the rivals is more of that street level. You know, this is my street. This is where we perform. You can't perform here because this is our location. Moving on to other gangs that fall under the both state and federal definition is the Aryan Game. So skinheads is probably one of the most popular extremist groups. You see a lot of that neo-Nazi, anti-gay, anti-immigrant. You're going to see the swastikas. You're going to see a lot of, again, the skinheads, the combat boots. Moving on to Peckerwoods, again, and I saw this myself before I even was gang trained and really didn't know what I was looking for. I was in South Florida and I was checking into a hotel and this guy had the Woody the Woodpecker tattoo on his calf. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange for a grown man, but you know, maybe he's just a big fan. I've seen other things, other cartoon characters, so didn't really think a whole lot of it. But I remember it stuck out because it was different. And later on, when I was gang trained, I realized, oh, wait, what I missed was, you know, he did have the shaved head. He was wearing combat boots. He was wearing pants and with rolled up. And there was just a lot of things that stood out that I didn't catch up on because I didn't have this training. So that's something that look for. Letters PW, APW, again, that same numerical, it falls under the same thing as the other national level gangs. The 88, 16, 23 is all very common. Hammer skin is another one. You'll see the crossed hammers as identifiers, Confederate flags, a lot of the Nazi symbols, Iron Cross, Celtic Cross, very similar also to the skinheads. And then also biker gangs. So not to say that all bikers are bad, right? My husband and I have, well, I don't have a motorcycle personally, I don't drive it, but I do ride with him. And there are a lot of great groups. There's a lot of biker groups that does great things. We work to get Bikers Against Trafficking that does amazing work. Bikers Against Child Abuse, again, does great work. But there are gangs out there, biker gangs, that are also have a lot of criminal activity, a lot of drug sale, a lot of meth, marijuana. There's clubs throughout Florida. We have the Big Four. Also here, the Hells Angels, the Pagans, the Pandinos, that we're going to talk about. So look for that MC. You oftentimes see this on their leather. It's a special social meaning motorcycle gang, motorcycle club rather, is what the MC stands for. 13 and its meaning in the biker world, it has several different meanings. It could be associated with drugs and narcotic sale. The letter M is the 13th letter of the alphabet, so it's also to stand for marijuana or motorcycle. And it's generally assumed that someone wearing a 13 patch is either a user of marijuana or other drugs or is involved in sale of them. The M also has been known to stand for methamphetamine. And the third definition of 13th patch is that the wearer is his own judge and jury. This is due to 13 standing for 12 jurors and the additional one being the judge. So Pagans is one of the top four, again, involved in a lot of criminal activity. They've been known for arsons, bombings, murders, stockpiling heavy machinery, guns, and other type of weaponry. They oftentimes come in contact with the Hells Angels. There's a lot of conflict between those two biker gangs. And then the Outlaws, world's oldest motorcycle club. There's over 1,700 members across 176 chapters, and they're often at war with the Hells Angels. Moving on to Hells Angels, the brand is strong. They actually have to have patent their label or their insignia to have it incorporated in U.S. and Canada. They have over 2,500 members across 6 continents. So again, they're everywhere. Hells Angels are often embroidered in a lot of turf wars. They battle the Mongols often, as well as the Outlaws. The Mongols, they have about 800 members. They're largely around California. A lot of big force there in that area, a lot of turf wars as well. They're largely based on race. So the majority of the Mongols are Hispanic or Native American. And the club was founded after a number of the Latino bikers were denied entry in the Hells Angels due to their race. Banditos, 2,000 members, one of the largest gangs here in the United States. They are in 16 states in 14 countries, and they also make up the Big Four. Warlocks, they have kind of a nasty reputation amongst a lot of the biker gangs. A lot of extreme violence. They're known to commit crimes, assaulting rival gang members, killing police officers, has also been linked to the Warlocks. They're very active in Pennsylvania and Florida, and they're associated also with a lot of meth sale or methamphetamine sale. Moving along to hybrid gangs. This is your homegrown. These are your local street gangs, and you'll know, especially if you live in some more of an urban type community, you may see this. You may be watching the news, and on Friday night there's a shooting, and then a couple hours later, a couple streets over, there's another one, or the next day. There's a lot of retaliation. There's a lot of a state of flux. There's a lack of organization. There's, again, that retaliation piece. It's just constant. There's a lot of confusion, honestly, with the hybrid gangs, because they are obviously smaller, local, than based on your national gangs. So sometimes if your local departments do a large bust of, whether it be for trafficking or whether it's drug trafficking or other violent crimes or a murder or what have you, and they bust up a particular local gang, they may merge with another local gang to keep them viable. We also see those mergers happen in prisons and in jail systems, and sometimes that's for safety reasons or for their own safety. They merge. So we do see a lot of that, and sometimes when that happens, the colors change or the colors are not associating correctly. The numerical may be off and alphabetical. So those are things that I know that when I'm working with the gang units, they see, and sometimes it can get very confusing why they were in this particular number but this particular color. So those local gangs may adopt symbols or large gangs in more than one city. They rival gangs and more corporate criminal activity. Existing gangs may change their name or merge with other gangs to form new ones. Gangs are not organized along strict racial or ethnical lines like you see on the national level. Gang members may have multiple affiliations, including memberships in rival gangs. There's a lot of trading off. Hybrid gangs may borrow symbols, graffiti, and gang colors from different gangs and mix them up. Again, that's how it can get very confusing. That's why you really need to outreach to your local gang unit, your local department, and know what's going on your local level. When they move or leave their old gangs and align themselves with a new local gang that has no ties to their original gang, and gang members may change their affiliation from one gang to another. So some things to look for: the clothing items, tattoos, brandings, hand signs, graffiti, artwork on vehicles, motorcycles, that dress to identify, those clothing colors, the jewelry, backpack, grooming, brands, belts, shoelaces, dress code, the Old English writing, colored shoelaces, hats, bandanas, socks up, shorts over, long belts, shaved eyebrows. Now, one of the things that you can do if you're wondering what exactly is going on in my local community, where oftentimes these items are sold is at your local farmers markets or your local flea markets. You oftentimes see these colors or see these items, and that may give you a red flag of what's going on in your local area. Understanding the difference of the colors and the examples of these are things that have been taken into the property rooms, the belt buckles, and things of that nature. The tattooing, again, looking at those points of that tattoo, looking at the Star of David, looking at the numbers and the numerical is very important. For sex trafficking tattoos, it's a lot of royalty. It's a lot of goddess, queen, princess. You're going to see that often. You're going to see the money symbol. Now, that money symbol is also a drug for drug trafficking as well, or drug sale. But it's also a common tattoo in the sex trafficking world. The diamonds, the stars are also very common. Again, they're common tattoos in general, right? You may have one of those yourself, but diamonds and stars and the money sign is very common. Again, like I said, that goddess, that queen, princess. Look for those points in that tiara or the crowns. Look for the alphabetical and numerical significance. So some signs, again, these are very common signs that you may see within the hand signals or hand signs that you may see on the national level as well as your local level. Look for that crossed out. Look for that upside down. Anything upside down, crossed out, there's some robbery going on. Those are, you really need to be paying attention to those when you're working in the field, when you're, driving around, you're maybe at a stoplight and you look over and you see a fence or you see a wall and you see a lot of these things crossed out or upside down, or even just the other indicators. Be aware of your surroundings for your safety, and not only your safety, but the people that you work with as well. But and obviously if you see it, if you go that route every day and yesterday it wasn't there and now it is, you want to report it. You want to make sure you're contacting your local gang units or patrol to gather that intel that something could be going down fairly quickly. Gang vocabulary, 5 People Nation or blood, 6 Folk Nation Crip, 187 is a homicide or a murder threat. These are things you can see in a lot of social media. There's a lot of beefing going back and forth, a lot of banter, and these are common things that are being said back and forth. 211 is an armed robbery, BK blood killer, CK Crip killer, Crab is disrespectful for Crips, Slobs is disrespectful for Bloods, Cuz a greeting for one Crip to another, IVL, insane vice lords, Norteños, Hispanic for another northerner, which frequents the number 14. Sorrentos, Hispanic, frequents the number 13. VLB is the Vita Loco Boys, Spanish disciples, and the drug selling symbol, it's the dollar sign. So types of incidents, it could be a stabbing, shooting, robbery, blunt force injury, rape, domestic violence, child abuse, recruitment for sex trafficking. We see all these things happening within the gangs. We talked about this a little bit in the beginning about the sexed in and the jumped in differences. I really want you to pay attention, again, like I said before, if there's a female that's involved or affiliated, look at their social media when you're doing your investigations. And of course, you guys are all over the place in the gamut. You may just be a community member that's interested in this topic. You may be a law enforcement or social service person. Make sure if you're any form of an investigative capacity or have any form of authority over that person, they're on your caseload or what have you, and their safety is paramount to you. Make sure that you're looking at their social media. Who are they affiliated with? Who are they friends with? Are they friends with gang members? Is there chatter back and forth and banter? What exactly is going on? You really need to be paying attention, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok. This is all very common that you will see that there's a lot of banter going back and forth. We're going to play a video, and we have edited the lyrics just for this presentation just because there's all walks of folks on here. Normally when I do this presentation for law enforcement or other groups, we do play the actual video so you can see what it looks like and see the actual lyrics, but you can figure it out even with the editing, the vulgar nation and what exactly they're trying to come across, and what 50 Cent in this in his lyrics of this song really spells out what it's like to be a trafficker or be a pimp. So you guys should have been able to fill in the blanks of what they were, what 50 Cent was saying there. If not, you can definitely Google or YouTube the lyrics to see the actual unedited version. But you can tell there's no love there. It's all about the money. It's all about what they're going to go about purchasing. It's not what about the female, which is primarily all gang sex trafficking is primarily female. We have seen some gangs that use transgender persons within the gang, but for the most part, it's primarily female. Whereas with human trafficking, we know it's male, female, young, old, all across the gamut. But we do know, I mean, spelled it out very clearly of what it's all about. If you turn on them, this is what's going to happen. There's going to be violence. There's going to be catching charges. They're going to expect them to take the blame. They're to protect the gang. So there's a lot of problems that goes along with the gangs as well.
Marina, a couple people have observed how high school students romanticize gangs, and that somebody else noted that they've listened to the song all their lives and never had dissected it in this way.
Yeah, that's actually the common comment that I get, that, you know, hey, we were bumping in the club all these years to the song and really didn't really know what the lyrics were. And to be honest with you, I probably am guilty of that myself. You know, he was very popular when I was in college and around, and I probably myself did the same thing as our kids do, right? So our kids, even today's music that they listen to, or if you really listen to the lyrics or really break it down and read them of what it is, there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of glamour with the street life, a lot of glamour with the gangs, a lot of, and this is how they recruit as well. They recruit kids, middle school, high school kids, and that's what we're up against, right? As workers in the field, you know, we promote for kids to continue their education, to go into a trade, to be successful. But we're up against society. We're up against an over-sexualized society to begin with. We're up against gangs that are saying, hey, come work for us and we can make fast cash. And we want these kids to work at Chick-fil-A, and they're making maybe, you know, what, $10, $12 an hour. But, you know, you can go and sell drugs and you can make, you know, 500 a day. So what are we saying to these kids? You know, this is what we're up against. Why would we want to go work for Chick-fil-A when you can go do this? And so it's really having to explain, but what they don't see is the violence and the continued violence.
Exactly.
And the continued exploitation that they're being.
Yeah, somebody's asking too about whether the song, do you know if the song was written to promote prostitution, or, you know, what the purpose of it was? And then someone else asked, what is a sick girl? What does that term mean?
So sick girl is just one within the stable. You also maybe heard the bottom. The bottom always brings them the money. So the bottom is the one that's kind of in control when that trafficker's not there, when that gang member's not there. That bottom, which is a female, will kind of oversee the other girls to make sure that they're doing what they're need to be doing, and that they're given the correct amount of money and they're not hiding money. So those are things that we see common terminology within, and they do have their own terminology. And again, that's something that just due to time, we're not able to add. I do have it in some of my other presentations, but it's something that you can easily Google. There's a lot of terms of the street life, or at the end of this presentation, you'll have my email. If you would like a terminology list, I'll be happy to send it out to you. Just kind of recap some of the stuff that we talked about. When you're working in your areas, be paying attention to the colors, be paying attention to the graffiti. And again, whether a lot of the graffiti, you're going to see it on fences, you're going to see it on the walls of businesses, especially condemned or closed down businesses. You may see it in and electrical boxes in neighborhoods is very common as well. So be paying attention to those things. If you're working with families, you know, communicate with the family and their concerns. Do the children always feel the need to be in possession of a weapon, whether that's a gun or a knife or some other type of a bat or some other type of weapon? Again, that one like for one color and dislike for other colors. Again, I'll give you that terminology list. Are these terms incorporated in their everyday language? Are they using hand symbols or signs to communicate with their friends, or in pictures? Now, sometimes you have to be careful with this, because sometimes even the best of kids like to throw these signs just to be funny. So you have to really, you know, look at that for what it is and what's going on. So we know that it's alarming increase of gangs into human trafficking. And what they've learned is what a lot of the traffickers, and when I say traffickers, I'm referring to a pimp, by the way. We just don't use pimp because it's not in our legal language. But what we know, they can supplement their income, right? You probably heard many times you can sell a person over and over again, but you sell a drug and then you have to go back and get more drugs. So that's one reason. They've learned that they can make more money selling, putting these women and these young girls on tracks. They're working. When I say tracks, it's like a shift. They're working 12, 14 hours a day. There's a lot of also drug sale, running their drugs, running their weapons, because oftentimes law enforcement doesn't look as much as the female as they look at the male. So sometimes they will have the females running their drugs or selling their drugs, or maybe even crossing over state lines, and the same thing with the guns. We also see this with gangs and recruiting these itty bitties. And when I say itty bitties, I mean like the under 10. And that for the same reason, law enforcement's not looking at an 8-year-old. They're looking at the 16, 17-year-old sibling. So oftentimes they'll recruit the young ones to be watchers for the gang or to run their drugs or guns. Now, when I say that, I always tell people, think about this. If you have a kid that's under the age of 10, they probably can't control their emotions very well, or their anger, right? When they get mad, they're still having temper tantrums at the grocery store when you tell them that they can't have the Reese's Pieces, and so think about that. If you have a 6, 7-year-old with possessions of weapons, that's dangerous because they can't control their emotions. So when their friend gets upset with them about something, instead of having an argument or what have you, it's easy for them to pull out a gun and shoot their friend. And we've seen where we've had gun activity and death occur with this young population. And a lot of it's because they've had possession of these weapons. Gangs use promise of protection, the status, money, loyalty. They're going to make them a star. They're going to make them successful. Again, females in gangs are the lowest ranking members and usually have no power, other than a few gangs that allow some type of ranking. Gangs use force of violence and threats of intimidation. Again, this is a big point here. When I told you why are not more prosecutions, more arrests being made for gang sex trafficking, this is the reason. It's force, it's violence, it's threats and intimidation. Violence starts almost immediately, whether they're jumped in or whether they're sexed in. Ongoingly, they're seeing drive-bys, they're seeing drug sales, they're seeing burglaries, they're seeing robberies on the daily. If they tell them, if you don't continue to do what I tell you to do, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to kill your family, or I'm going to go after your little sister. It's a viable threat, and they know that. So they're not going to talk. Sex trafficking victims oftentimes do not self-identify, even on just human trafficking alone. But you bring in that gang sex trafficking, not only are they not self-identifying, they say they're part of this gang, this is their family, this is where their loyalty is, this is their sense of belonging. Therefore, they're not going to roll on their family. And whether that's male gang members or females, they're not going to roll. They're not going to talk. They're going to be loyal to that gang. And again, they're scared, they're terrified, and they have absolutely 100% reason to be. We've had multiple cases here in the state of Florida, as well as all over our nation, where that bad things have happened to these girls and women that try to get out, and then they're retaliated, or they start talking, and then even though there's a hit put on them, they may arrest one person in the gang or a couple people in the gang. But again, is there a gang of one? No, it's 3 to 5 or more, right? So therefore, you might arrest a few, and then the gang retaliates on that victim. So we see this ongoingly. It's an ongoing issue, and it's something that we have to, as providers, as workers in this field, whether you're law enforcement or social services, or again, a provider, you need to take in consideration the safety of your victim. Consider it a viable threat. Consider what you need to do to have them moved outside of your local area if need be, or whatever you have to do by partnering with your local, state, and federal law enforcement to try to keep your victims safe. It is paramount. We've had kids, we've had young adults that was severely injured and have been killed from gang members because they talked. So it's very important that we take their safety in 100% consideration. Again, gangs are going to use social media, websites to advertise. Almost all the advertisement, that street level prostitution is very limited in certain areas. Almost everything is going through social media advertisements or web-based advertisement. And the same thing, the exchange of money is not so much cash on hand anymore. They're using cash apps. They're using Venmos, PayPals to transfer that money. The gangs often tattoo and brand the females, and they view them as their property. If you're working,
Marina, real quick, someone asked and just noted that a lot of the gangs you've described are Latinx or Black members. Are there any white gangs, white gang members, hate groups, etc., that would be included in what you're talking about?
Absolutely. Any of the gangs, pretty much that I talked about, there's affiliation on whites and blacks. It's not all black. It's not all white. Other than some of the Hispanic gangs, majority, are all Hispanic. Rarely will you see another ethnicity group. But there's Bloods and Crips that have white gang members and other gang members, other ethnicities as well. Of course, the white supremacy groups are primarily, they're going to be all white that we see throughout the nation. In some of the biker clubs, like I said, some of them they're Black, they're white, they're all ethnicity groups, and then there's a few that majority are just Hispanic or Native American. Where I was going with the gangs, with the tattoos and the branding, if you are working with a client or you know someone that has a gang tattoo, whether they're male or female, and they want out of that gang, and the same thing with just sex trafficking, with human trafficking, if they have been branded by their trafficker, if they have a tattoo or branding, and they want it removed or covered up, all the local circuit task forces throughout Florida work with tattoo artists, work with plastic surgeons and dermatologists that are willing to provide cover-ups or willing to provide removals for free for gang members, as well as sex trafficking victims and labor trafficking victims. So please, 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 if you are working with someone, and if you're outside the state of Florida, please still contact us. We have contacts all over the nation that we can assist you with finding someone that's willing to assist with doing a cover-up or removal. So has unexplained physical injuries, has unexplained cash or goods, jewelry, clothing, shoes, hair, and nails are very common. In trafficking in general, you're going to see a lot of the hair, nails, and new clothing. That's the number one sign. If they cannot afford that, they have no means to support it. They're not working. Their families are not providing them this money. How are they getting that? And I want you to think about that. How in general, if people have cell phones, electronics, jewelry, hair, nails, clothes, and they are not working, how are they paying for these items? People are not going to just give you these things. People are just not going to give drugs away. What is the exchange? Think about that. So I want you to always keep that in the back of your mind, because normally when you're working with maybe a client, they're going to tell you their friend bought these things for them. And I want you to think about your friends. You might be able to score a mani-pedi for your birthday or Christmas or something. But most likely, if you're maybe you're going out for beers or what, and they buy around. But usually your friends are not buying these things for you on a regular basis. They're not paying for your cell phones. They're not buying you a cell phone. They're not paying for you to get your hair done every week. They're not paying for you to get your nails done every couple of weeks. So what's going on in exchange for that? Traffickers want the money. It's always about the money, right? Always about the bread, like 50 Cent said. So if it is, what's the reason for the clothes, the jewelry, the perfumes, the colognes, the hair and nails? I always tell people, if you're going to go sell your car, are you going to sell it the way it looks like in your driveway? No, you're going to wash it, armor all it, make it look nice because you want top dollar. Well, these traffickers want top dollar for these people. So they don't want them to come, and their hair hadn't been washed in several days, or haircut hadn't been done in months, or they don't have the best clothes, they don't smell the greatest. They want them to look the best so they can get top dollar. So it's not out of their kindness of their heart they're paying for these things. It's all about the money and the profit. So keep that in mind. Has criminal record, affiliates in areas that's known for gang activity. They sell drugs or using drugs. They're using gang signs or slang and symbols. They're keeping late hours, breaking curfew rules, carrying weapons, declining school behavior. So what should you ask the parents? That display of creative and specific artwork, gang symbols, school books, clothing, or on walls has unexplained injuries inconsistent with a physical altercation. Or I should say consistent with a physical altercation, but inconsistent with how it happened. So for instance, they may said that they ran into a door or they fell down a stair. Well, is that consistent with what they're presenting as their injury? Has unexplained cash, clothing, jewelry, or high-end electronics, feels the need to carry some type of weapon, shows interest in particular colors and dislike for others, insists on wearing specific logos or particular type of clothing, use of unusual hand signals to communicate with friends, new or unusual interest in gang influence music, videos, movies, or web pages. And that's why it's so important to be paying attention to what your kids is watching on TV, what movies they're watching, what music videos they're listening to, what video games they're playing, because it is glamorized. Won't let you view their social sites or cell phone. Well, that's a whole nother thing, especially if you're a parent, because if you own that cell phone, that's your cell phone, so, or your computer. So you make sure that your children are aware of that you can take it back at any time. Exhibits negative behaviors not common with that child. So what can you do to prevent from joining gangs? Spend quality time with youth. Keep youth involved in activities. Be a positive role model and set examples. Tutor students. Encourage school and further education. Get to know the youth and their friends and always keep an open line of communication. Encourage job training and internships. Be proactive and always ask questions. Encourage participation in positive after-school activities with supervision, such as sports or youth groups. Provide anger management, conflict resolution, and stress management. This one is big. Our kids these days has no conflict resolution, no anger management skills. Teach youth how to cope with peer pressure, that it's okay to say no. Always encourage and provide praise for good behaviors, and also let them have that open communication and a safe person, whether that's yourself or someone else that they can go to when they're having problems. Don't be in denial. You have to take action for the first sign of gang affiliation. When the first sign is happening, you need to present it to your supervisor immediately and take action. Establish a plan of action and clearly document your signs and your concerns. Notify local law enforcement, gang units, and the child is involved with DJJ, notify their JPO or their juvenile probation officer of your concerns. If you wait, it might be too late, so don't be afraid to take action. We're going to view another film. This is through the Polaris Project. It's also available on YouTube. We're going to link this to this presentation as well. But I think what the poem states is very impactful. So listen carefully.
She was 4 years old the first time a man looked at her the way a man looks at his wife on their wedding day. Little girls are supposed to dream about being models and doctors and veterinarians. Instead, she fought sleep eyes wide with terror of another night greeted by her stepfather's shadow. He was a real monster in her bedroom, and Mom, she was too fragile, too selfish to accept the truth that her little girl's innocence had been stolen one night when her boyfriend decided she wasn't good enough anymore. And since the little girl never had a real father, she accepted his advances because he always promised her his touches were acceptable, because he loved her. When you don't know yourself and you don't love yourself, you will fall for anything that sounds like love and feels like love. She was a walking corpse, stained with the fingerprints of strangers. And all she wanted was to walk the earth without the heaviness, the weight of all the men who tore a piece of her and took it with them. She never made it to see her 18th birthday. This is for the pain, for the stains that bath water won't wash away, for the scars left on the hearts of the fatherless child. This is for the girls objectified instead of praised like queens. This is for the agony. Growing up without a father, but all you really want is love, and you don't understand love. So one day when some guy stops you in a train station or a street corner and tells you you're beautiful, you are quickly intrigued. You like the fact that someone notices you, and you will do anything to feel like he's everything, and he promises you everything, and the things he convinces you to do, they don't seem that bad if afterwards he shows you how much he loves you. Your morals are abandoned on that sidewalk where you turned your first trick. Your beauty is left in that hotel room where some stranger touched you like his girlfriend and then left the money on the nightstand. And every night, you die again, compromising your worth for what your pimp calls love and security. The hustle, the street lights, the schemes, it never seems worth it, but you have the liquor to comfort your fears. And as long as your profits meet expectations, you will have what you always wanted your whole life. Love. Love that doesn't feel right, but it's all you think you're worth, so you take it every day. You sleep when the sun comes up, rise when the sun is down. Conceal the torment with makeup and stylish hairdos. Put on your best outfits. Something arousing because you have to make them happy. The men, the tricks, the pimps. This is for the pain. This is for America. In hopes that you will notice that 12-year-old girl who was forced to trade her lunchbox and sneakers for a Chanel purse and pumps. This is for the 16-year-old girl kidnapped by a gang of men on her way to school and held captive in a house right next door to you. This is for the 20-year-old girl who took her last beating today because she couldn't bring herself to let another man hold her down and violate her. We are all slaves for love, degrading ourselves for acceptance of a man that's the closest thing to a father figure we've ever known. We were once just girls with aspirations and a small piece of hope. Now who will notice us? Who will save America's daughters?
Who's going to save America's daughters? It's up to us in society to do our part, to mentor, to provide kids with safe activities, to provide communities with safe places for kids to congregate, for understanding that they are loved and that they are cared for and that they don't have to join a gang to have that sense of belonging. There's other forms of positive sense of belongings within neighborhoods and communities. And reach out if there's so many kids that are in need of good homes, good, adoptive homes. If you're in a position or interested in becoming an adoptive or a foster parent or an adoptive parent, please feel free to reach out. If you're in Florida, if you're somewhere else in the country, please feel free to reach out and I will get you in contact with a local agency in your area. But it is so important that we do our part in having other options for kids, because a lot of times they feel like they have no option. There's no hope. There's no other way, and there are other ways, but we have to do our part to get that information out. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. This is my information. The best way to reach me is by email, and definitely texting me would be the second best option. Calling is not, I'm doing trainings constantly, so sometimes that can be more difficult for me. But please feel free to email me any questions, concerns you may have. Again, we're going to provide this link on multiple different platforms, the terminologies as well. And I am definitely open for any questions that you guys may have.
Marina, thank you. That was extremely, extremely informative and powerful, and it's reflected in the chat as well. You have a lot of people noting how awesome it is and wanting to kind of absorb this information so that they can see the presentation later. I do have some questions I'd like you to address if you could. One is somebody asked about they're in a residential group home that serves at-risk the general population, but there are at-risk kids in that population. Do you have any special things that they should be doing beyond what you said in the presentation?
Yeah. So with, all walks of life, whether it's at risk or not, I always say what really defines that, right? We just recently are going through some definition changings, and that is one of the definitions we were working at. What defines at risk, right? Because really, when you look at different components, all kids are at risk. All young people are at risk, especially when we go back to that social media recruitment piece. So working in those group home settings or those transitional living settings or working with a high-risk population in general, again, we said a lot of tidbits in this presentation, but I would say some of the number one things to look for if they're coming about with hair, nails, new items that they can't afford, the multiple cell phones. Those are huge indicators that something could be going on. And it could be trafficking and it could be something completely different, but normally it's some type of criminal element. Pay attention to who they're around. Are all their friends older? If they are 13, 14 years old and all their friends seem to be 17, 18, 19, 20 plus, huge concern for you that there's some type of recruitment, there's some type of manipulation factor, a coercion piece going into play. So pay attention to that. Are they hanging out with people that are affiliated, whether that's gangs or maybe it's kids that we've already, or adults that we've already indicated as perpetrators or traffickers or recruiters or already identified as commercially sexually exploited children or C-sex children. That's another indicator that you really need to look for. Is there something going on that puts these kids even at higher risk of getting involved into trafficking?
Great, thank you. Here's another question. What is the best way of getting involved and helping other than fostering?
So number one thing is to get involved in your local task force or coalition. So if you are here in Florida, we definitely have a list. We have a task force or coalition. And it depends on where you are. Some are labeled task forces, some are labeled coalitions, depending on when you when they came about, so to speak. The newer formed ones are all labeled task forces. Some of the coalitions were formed years before the legislation passed. But getting involved, and Big Ben is a BB Cat is definitely one of them in the Tallahassee area, but in every circuit of Florida, we have a task force or a human trafficking coalition, and they have different arms of that. You know, we have an education committee, you have services and resources, you have a law enforcement piece, you have just a community member and volunteer faith-based subcommittees. So please feel free to reach out to me and let me know what your area, if you're in Florida. Again, if you're not in Florida, I can still reach out and get that information for you in your local area, but definitely get involved and know what's going on, know what's trending in your local communities.
Somebody just asked too, Marina, where does the sex trafficking that gangs perpetrate take place? Is it in hotels? Is it, someplace else? Is it everywhere? I mean, I guess they do it just like everyone else who's a sex trafficker does it, right?
Right. It could be anywhere. It could be in houses. It could be in trap houses. It could be in hotels. It could be in the back of vehicles or in the front of vehicles for that matter. It could be in your local parks. So it could be in multiple places. I would say most commonly hotels, more so than anything, but definitely it can happen anywhere.
Someone else has just asked too about a lot of this is so hyper masculinized activity. It seems like it's very macho type activity. Do you see any other kind of gang activities where females are involved as leaders, or there's other kinds of of illegal portfolios, drugs, etc.?
Yes. So there are a few gangs out there that has a female hierarchy, but there's not many. Most do not have a voice. They're members, but they have no voice, no voting power or what have you. But there are some that do. Some hybrid gangs and some of the Hispanic gangs as well has a form of a hierarchy for the females, and they kind of oversee the other females, so to speak, within the gangs. So there is some, but it is limited.
Okay, great. Let's see, any other questions coming in? I work with undocumented youth. Are there special suggestions to keep in mind about them?
Yes. So this is another high-risk population group. Depending on where they're from in their home country, gangs play a significant role in other countries. And also gangs play a significant role in also with the transportation with people from one country to another. So when they're coming here, a lot of times they are paying the gangs to be able to transport them here. And then sometimes they're paying gang members once they arrive here on U.S. soil to transport them to where they need to go, or the movement piece, the transportation piece. So be aware of that. Be aware of, where their home country, where their home city is. Is there gang affiliation? If so, what are their colors? What are their numbers? What's to look for? So if you start seeing this activity going on in your local area or being portrayed, you need to be aware and let local law enforcement know.
Somebody else just asked, does this happen in the LGBTQ plus population?
Yes, we are seeing more, especially with our transgender persons are getting involved. Gangs have realized, again, we go back, it's all about the money, right? It's all about how much money they can make. And they have realized that there's a supply and demand, and we have seen multiple transgender persons being trafficked out of gangs.
First of all, thank you again, Marina. You were awesome. Just awesome. Just amazing. And thank all of you for all your questions. We may do this again, I think, sometime, maybe beginning of next year, because this has been such a well-attended, almost 800 of you were with us the whole time. This slide that you have up now, just want to highlight a few things for you. If you are in our area, we are having our next task force meeting on September 9th, and Kelly Doherty is the person to contact to get information on that meeting. STAC is hosting its big event on September 10th. We're going to be doing this online, and this is a really, I would call it a fun event where we're going to have really celebrate local businesses, farms, and others that are all anti-trafficking and all using preparing foods with goods and supply chains that are slavery and trafficking free. That's a free event, very informative, at lunchtime on the 10th. The next third Friday training will be on September 18th. The link is up on the STAC website. That's a hyperlink in the title there. You can click on that and register. We're going to have Caridad Mas-Bachelor and Teresa Kennedy from the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force present. They have a very active task force. Every task force does something a little different, or coalition. So it's always fun to see what everyone's doing around the state. I want to highlight the state of Florida's, the Attorney General's annual Human Trafficking Summit, where this will be a program again. I know, Marina, you're doing this again. That's October 6th. There's your link to register for that event. And again, this link at the very bottom, the educational resources, that's the link that you can click on and see all the past trainings. We've had a focus on a survivor story. We've had focuses on a number of different topics, working with underserved populations, online at-risk activity, so you can really protect kids from traffickers and sex traffickers online. So please take a look at that. Again, here is our contact information. This is Graciela, our victim advocate's name and number here, and our website here. And that's, I think, it. We are at 2:31. We're a minute over. Again, thank all of you for participating.
All right, thanks so much.
All right, thanks, everybody.